there is this idea that when opportunities are created and that business opportunities are created, it is in fact government that allows for that environment to be available, right? When we want jobs for young people, they're created by businesses, but businesses rely on government making sure there is an environment for that to happen. So in the next 30 minutes, I really want us to start thinking about what we want to ask our governments when we leave this room. It's an important discussion. We are essentially a continent of so many young people and a bulging population of young people. 83% of the jobs that are created, though, for young Africans are in the informal sector. How many of you here can argue that there are enough formalized young businesses on the continent? Put your hand up if you think we've done enough to formalize young businesses on the continent. No. So we can agree that certainly a lot of work needs to be done in formalizing the businesses of young people. It's not enough that you have young people that are creating opportunities for themselves, hustlers, creating those jobs for themselves, but unable to then access banking services or access funding because they have not been allowed into the formal sector. But for that to happen, we also need to create an environment where it's easy for small to medium enterprises owned by young people can be formalized. So I'm standing here today and I'm bringing you this discussion that is essentially hosted by the One campaign. And the theme of this next discussion is going to be creating opportunities for Africa's young people, moving from rhetoric to action. I think over the last 2 days, you've heard a lot of hashtag type of statements, right? The youth are the future. We're creating our own opportunities. We are our own hustlers. But how do we move beyond creating those hashtags and the rhetoric to actually starting to see action opportunities on the ground? Is that something you want to see? Is that something you want to see? Surely you guys are tired of the hashtags and the we're going to create opportunities for young people. Do you want to see the action? All right, so that's what we're going to talk about. Moving from rhetoric to action. I'm going to ask, please, that we invite up onto the stage, just to open the discussion for us, Ms. Sarah Maka, who's the Interim Africa Executive Director for the One campaign. Please give her a warm round of applause.
So can I ask you, indulge me one thing? If everyone can stand up, remember your investor could be beside you, your team member can be beside you. So everyone please stand up everywhere around the room. Excellent. Take one big stretch up, your hands up, just to get that energy flowing, the thing going to your brain, let your blood, let your heart be pumping. All right, I love it. All right, yes. Yes, all the way in the top. I don't see you guys on the top standing up. And then one more thing before you sit down. Introduce yourself to the person beside you who might be your investor or your team member or your business colleague. So take a few seconds to do that. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Give yourselves a round of applause, please, as we take our seats. Can I ask that you stay for this session because there are going to be a lot of secrets that we're going to release during this session. Number one secret for this session. The reason we come to these kinds of sessions, these kinds of conferences, are indeed to increase our education, but guess what? It's also to meet people. And people are the singular most important factor to launching success of your life, your business. Good quality relationships. So please don't leave this conference without having that done. Now to the business of the day. I just want to thank Naledi for the introduction. Thank you. Can you guys all give Naledi a round of applause? She'll moderate us really well today. You're in for a treat. All right, thank you. So we have young people all over this pavilion. We have policymakers. It's a time for us to converse, communicate, exchange ideas. So we're here to talk about how to create more opportunities for young people. Not just, as we say in Nigeria, talk, but some action. So let me start with numbers. Write these numbers down. 1.4 billion. This is the number of Africans we have on the continent. 930 million. That is the number of young Africans we have under 30 years old. 110 million. That's the number of young people entering the marketplace in the last 10 years. So keep that number close, 110 million. Check out this number, 37 million. That's the number of wage-paying jobs that were created on the continent in the last 10 years. And lastly, 15 million. That's the number of jobs we need to create in Africa every single year. The focus of this panel is the Jobs Now campaign. And at the One campaign, we got together with nonprofits, youth groups, think tanks, and organizations to build an African People's Charter. What's an African People's Charter? Well, it is the charter that we want you all to be a part of. Can I get you guys to repeat the African People's Charter, please? I can tell you're not listening because I didn't get it back except from one person over here. The African People's Charter. That's getting better. The African People's Charter on Jobs. And this is going to be important to you. When we were here yesterday, we heard His Excellency, the Deputy President of Kenya, Mr. Rigathi Gachagua. He said this: policies are influenced through advocacy and lobbying. And the secret, lean in for the secret, policies don't make themselves. They need you and they need me and they need pressure. So what the African People's Charter is a coalition of signatures from you and me to increase the numbers, which increases the pressure, which increases the influence, which allows us to lobby your parliamentarians, your executive arm of government, to make the policies that unleash the private sector, unleash your jobs, unleash your businesses, so your businesses can thrive. So One started working on this, and we have around the room some One champions. Can I see One champion stand up? Meet them, yes, look at them all over, and sign the African People's Charter, because remember, numbers creates pressure, pressure creates influence, influence creates lobbying and advocacy, and it moves governments to act. So sign that African Charter, and also get 10 of your friends to sign it as well. It's really important as we lobby to make these policy changes. Now, what we did was we worked with 5 countries across the continent to identify one policy that we need the government to move. But we only did it in 5 countries. How many countries do we have on the continent? How many countries on the continent? How many African countries on the continent? Just shout it out. 54. So we are in 5. What happens to the 49? This is where you come in. I'll give you 4 steps to making a change in your country. Number 1, be informed about the sector in your country that creates the most amount of jobs. The job-rich sectors, we call it. Work with think tanks in your countries, work with universities, and get informed about what are the sectors that create jobs in your country. Number 2, find your team. The people sitting around you could be your team. Find your allies, find your friends, find your strangers, find your strange bedfellows, and get together, people who are passionate about this topic. Number 3, use your voice. Your voice is pressure. Signing the charter is pressure. Organizing yourselves is pressure. And that pressure makes things move in your country. And the last point, which is really important, be persistent. Be relentless. Keep at it. Nothing good comes from just doing it easy. And we have found as an advocacy organization that persistence is key. Let me conclude by saying this. To our policymakers in the room, to our young people in the room, there's a phrase that says the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And if we want to create an Africa where we are not last on the queue for vaccines during a pandemic, or where we have the most arable land and we don't have to import things like wheat from a little known country in Europe, or we can get back the glory of Africa as the cradle of humanity, we need to use our minds in the room. So the appeal to policymakers is allow our young people to come and put the pressure on you to make these changes where they see changes need to be made. For our young people, is educate yourself to ensure we know where the changes need to be made. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how changes occur. And with that, let me pass it on to the lady who can take us to the rest of the panel. Thank you all very much. Can I go down?
Please give Ms. Sarah Maka another round of applause. So, we're very good at protesting as young Africans at getting the attention of our governments. Today, we want to do the same just for this last session before we wrap things up. So I'm going to ask my panelists to please get up on the stage so we can get started. We've got one champion, a young person who's representing you and is lobbying for that jobs charter that a lot of you were able to sign up for today so that you're able to join the process of advocacy as well. Please welcome onto the stage Ms. Mercy Mutana, one champion, Kenyan youth advocate and management consultant, and also formerly serving as youth director of Sub-Saharan International Model United Nations. So obviously in advocacy work, you want the work to begin from young people such as Mercy. And this is a young woman who's passionate and has a fiery personality and wants the attention of governments so that they write the right policies for us. But you also want that pressure to come from the very top, from above our governments, or at least where our governments organize themselves together. So I'm going to please invite onto the stage Ms. Nontobeko Chabalala, Communications and Advocacy Lead for Women, Gender and Youth Directorate at the African Union Commission. Please, a warm round of applause. And then I mentioned this earlier, and I said, listen, the reality is we are hustlers as young Africans. We are. And we have a lot of great stories. But it's always interesting to hear from a young and successful entrepreneur about what is it that has gotten in their way in terms of what government has written down as legislation that perhaps has slowed their business down, and what it is that they want to see done a little bit better. So I'm going to please invite from the Gambia, Mr. Osman Torre, who is a young and successful entrepreneur. Please give him a warm round of applause. And then from the UNDP, I'd like to please welcome onto the stage Ms. Pauline Debanier, who is a youth advisor. Please, a warm round of applause. We're going to keep it quite short. But I want you to, towards the end, I'll give you 5 minutes for questions, just 5. But I really want it to be questions. I saw earlier that, you know, when you had the microphone, you used the opportunity to let us know who you are. But right now, I want us to make this an opportunity to tell our panelists what they need to be telling governments so that you don't have to tell people who you are in a room. Government gives you a platform consistently. So I want to start with Sis Nontobeko Chabalala from the AU and say, a lot of the work that we've done, a good afternoon to you, a lot of the work that we've done at One Campaign has been to raise awareness about the importance of writing policy and legislation on the continent, particularly that focuses on creating opportunities for young people. Are we getting anywhere? Is the AU able to convince governments to align their policy for these young people?
Thank you so much, Naledi. Just wanting to make sure you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. That is a fantastic question. And I would say, as a young person who works in this policy-making space particularly, that has always been a source of not frustration, but interest rather for me. Are we getting anywhere? All of this work that we're doing, where is it really taking us? I would say, and I think the executive director made a fantastic point when she said, policy needs pressure. That's how you get somewhere. So it's one thing for an organization like the African Union Commission to create policies, develop policies, but it's a completely other issue altogether where we're requiring governments to contextualize those policies at national level. So provide opportunities for young people inside their countries. So we need young people. There's something about alignment that needs to happen. Young people and these policy-making institutions need to come together and apply pressure from both sides so that we're actually getting somewhere. That's how I'd answer your question.
Yeah, I've got a quick question for the audience, and I don't need you guys to necessarily speak up, but how many of you have ever attended a protest for jobs? Put your hand up if you've ever attended a protest because we're demanding jobs. That's it? Out of all the young people that are here, only about 3 of you have attended a protest asking for jobs from your government? Okay. That's an interesting learning, Mercy, right? Does that mean that young people want opportunities, but they simply don't understand that they have a responsibility as well to require that government writes it into policy? So essentially what I'm asking is, do young people care about policy and why should they? Mercy.
I think, and I'll speak for all the youth in the room, that we actually do care. But the truth is, when it comes to policy making and pretty much matters public policy, public development, and government relations, we find that many youth may not be informed. And as our interim executive director, One Campaign, had mentioned, is that the first step to creating change is that you need awareness. So if you're not aware of how to do this advocacy, if you're not aware of what government is doing, if you're not aware of how you can provide your solutions, because many a times I think we are quick on social media and we do a fantastic job. I think we are unmatched as youth to advocate online. But when it comes to the room, that matters. When it comes to the table of decision making, I think that's where there's a gap. I don't know if the youths are at the table. I don't even know if they're in the room. Some don't even know the building they ought to be in. Thank you.
Yeah, an interesting point. Osman, I'm going to bring this one to you. You're an entrepreneur from the Gambia. Again, we're talking about what governments do to write policy so that young people can access opportunities sufficiently. Do you think that the room is this quiet because of what Mercy's saying, that government doesn't include us in the discussion? As a young person who's built a business, what have you found government has done wrong in what they have written as policy that you feel needs to be fixed for young entrepreneurs and young opportunity creators?
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to join the rest of the panelists. I think the biggest disconnect that we have when it comes to policy formulation is there's a big gap between the people they're targeting for the policies and the people actually making these policies. If you should ask me what are my skills and what am I thinking about, how much do I want to leverage technology to advance my businesses, my answers will be totally different from the basis through which our current governments today formulates policies on. Young people has to be consulted before and during so that they can see themselves and their interests reflected in the policies that are developed. However, this is not the reality in so many African countries today. People who should be in their retirement, individuals who have no ideas about what's coming to be in the next few years, with tech, with other global changes, are actually formulating policies on behalf of the future of the young generation seated here. So there's a whole disconnection from the policy level, and therefore it doesn't entice young people to even wanting to find more on what is there.
Yeah.
So if we really want to address that, we have to look into what do young people want and how do we incorporate them in every aspect of policy formulation. How do we equally narrow the gap between academia and policy formulation, which is critical? All of us here are coming from institutions, either universities, high schools, or other degrees of educational levels. But there is a whole disconnection between universities, who are supposed to be the actual drivers of change and solution centers where these young people are coming from, and the institution responsible for formulating the policies. So academic-wise, when we go to school, the skills we develop, the ideas we grow up in schools is totally disconnected from the actual policies we have on the ground.
Right.
Once, or by addressing this, perhaps more people will be interested in policies and will also question what governments offer and are able to hold them accountable too.
I'm thinking about, in the previous discussion that we just had, there was a gentleman from the African Development Bank who was on the stage, or one of the speakers a little bit earlier was talking about how the real challenge that we have, and this was obviously now about funding, but the real challenge that we have, he said, was that the system of supporting young business that we have in place needs to be re-looked at completely. But that goes back to policy. That's the responsibility of government to make sure that if we're going to have an overhaul of systems that allow for opportunities to come from young people, it has to come from government. I'm interested to hear from you if you think that from the bird's eye view of the UNDP, some of the ideas that you've seen where government has written the right policies for young people and it's worked, or where it's just been an atrocious mess and government simply not looking at policy sufficiently to fit the needs of young people.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the question. It's also a pleasure to be here and to actually hear also some nice, inspiring reflections for other young entrepreneurs. Now, I would like to start perhaps echoing what my co-panelists just said. In terms of consulting with young people to build policy and influence policies. And I think that's one of the added value and the vision of UNDP is to actually go beyond consultation of young people, which indeed is important because policy matters, because it also helps make the programs and projects that we support more sustainable. But at UNDP, we consider that it's not enough to consult young people, it's not enough to have young people represented around the table, but we need to make sure that we also build enabling environment for sustainable participation, meaningful participation of young people at all times. So just to give perhaps a few examples of initiatives that UNDP has supported across the continent in that regard. In Kenya, for example, I don't know if we have young people from Kenya here. Yes. I see some hands. So in Kenya, UNDP has supported the establishment of what we call the Youth Sounding Board. So it's basically a group of young people, only young people, that are consulted and that are meant to influence the UN programming in the country. And that's something that we are now trying to replicate in other countries across the continent on various topics, on entrepreneurship, access to jobs, on climate, anything. But young people are there to sit at the table with policymakers and influence the UN programming. Another example that I would like to give is from Madagascar. I don't know if we have, si on a des gens de Madagascar. We do. So in Madagascar, another great example is the establishment of a youth observatory, which I think is also a good way to have young people at the table at all times. Not only to be consulted, but also to be fully involved in the collection of data. So these youth observers have been appointed during the elections a few years back, but the observatory stayed in place. And what's interesting is that now they are fully involved in the collection of data on various topics in the country, and they can help also on the prevention of electoral violence, risk of conflict, and it's completely driven by young people. So to wrap up my statement, that's UNDP vision, to go beyond policy and also make sure that in practice, we have young people around the table at all times and that they can voice their needs and aspirations. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Mercy, I'm going to come back to you. And you know, a little bit earlier, we had Sarah talk about the jobs charter. You've spent the, good chunk of today speaking to these young people, trying to get their contacts so that they're part of the process of lobbying for a jobs charter to be adopted by governments across the continent. Talk to me about how we start to really stoke the interest of young people to be part of the lobbying process. Because otherwise, if we don't, we're going to end up with an extending situation like what Osman was talking about earlier when he said, well, you've got a population that is reaching retirement, that is writing the policy that is going to be impacting our lives for the next few generations when they are long gone. They will write the blueprint of our lives. How do you go about on a daily basis as a champion, reminding young people that if they don't contribute to the policy, our grandmothers will make those decisions for us?
So myself, I come from Kenya, and what I can say from my experience, the first step is that there must be people willing to listen, and it's good to have summits like this, which I know YouthConnekt, whatever I said here, will definitely reflect in the youth decisions of African Union eventually. So at a country context, it requires that there is a space given for youth to be able to advocate their issues and also give recommendations that are coming from them. Because at the end of the day, if it's a youth program, they are the beneficiaries. So they ought to be part of the process of strategizing and especially conceptualizing from the beginning. If they're allowed to be there from the beginning of the concept so that the problems are well articulated and the solutions are youth-friendly. Because, for example, if you give a young entrepreneur, and that's something we did in our country. So I happen to also be part of a political party, and I was able to be part of the drafting process of the youth charter of that political party, which is currently the ruling party. So we were able to articulate to our current president that when you want to deal with us youth, when you want to invest in us, the current financial models may not work for us. And we are the ones who are at the bottom. And that's why he had the approach called bottom up, that the youth and those who are underprivileged in access to finance are youth and women. And so we need solutions that can cater to them. And one thing that is identified with Kenya is that 70% of businesses and probably most youth, their businesses are informal. So how do you finance an informal business? You can't say that you will probably give loans through a bank in the normal way, yet these commercial banks want a registered business, want collateral, want experience, want a balance sheet. And this is something an 18-year-old and under 25 like me will definitely miss out. And that's why in the earlier panel, many said they're looking outside, because outside they're more liberal or they have more innovative solutions. You find, like, for example, even in employment, a company like Google, you don't need a degree. But to be honest, most countries here, there's a lot of paper needed. There's a lot of certifications needed. So being able to innovate a solution that is suitable to youth, and particularly for youth, there is need to consider informal businesses. How can you give special or innovative products? For example, in my country, we have what we call SACCOs, or in my country, there's also group borrowing. So we had a youth fund that was created by the government, and you could come with your idea, and you have to be a group of youth, and you could table your idea, and based on that idea, you're given money, and you're given a year or two to be able to repay the loan. So such solutions, when it comes to women, our country is very big on table banking. So you'll find that some banks have then modeled to suit their product to be able to work with a women group that does table banking. So what really is needed is that there's people to listen, people to consider our recommendations, because at the end of the day, if you don't hear the problem and the suggestions, then there will be a gap.
Yeah, because I can sit here and ask everyone to give us ideas on what they want to see government do for young people, but if government isn't listening, there's no point. That we're essentially young people screaming into a hole and nobody's taking us seriously. It's just not Tobago, then I bring it to you and I say, well, what are the platforms that as the AU are creating? So that when we leave here, we can go back to the AU and say, no, our governments need to write this kind of policy for opportunity creation for young people, that you give us the platform to speak to you so that you can hold governments accountable.
Thank you so much.
I'm putting pressure.
A lot of pressure. We did say policy needs pressure, right? I heard something in the previous session, I think. Someone said...
closer to the mic.
Closer still?
Yeah.
Is this better? Okay. So someone said in the previous session, we don't want to be empowered, we want investments. And I remember that gave me a little bit of pause because I said, being empowered is an investment, and it's an investment that institutions like the African Union Commission are able to make in young people. And why I say that is because we provide platforms such as, on the 1st of November, for example, is Africa Youth Day. And we're hosting a 3-4 day forum. I hope the young people can hear me. We're hosting a 3-4 day forum, and it's our Pan-African Youth Forum. And it's specifically looking at how to break the barriers in meaningful engagement or youth participation and advocacy. So we want to help young people have that platform and tell us, right, what are the policies that you want us to design so that we're helping you put pressure on your governments for the correct things. And I'll give you an example of some of the policies we have done that have wholly been strategized by young people. 1 million by 2021 initiative, which is now 1 million next level. We want to reach 300 million young people by 2030 in the areas of education, engagement, employment, entrepreneurship, and health and well-being. Ambitious goal, but I don't think it is. Young people are ambitious too, right? They told us that these are the things they want. That's the first one. The second one is around COVID-19 and getting vaccinated. So you'll see outside the African Union has a booth, essentially an exhibition booth. And we're talking to people about the importance of getting vaccinated and how once you take care of your health, because that underscores everything, right? So if your health is not okay, your community is not okay, it does not matter how much you advocate, the opportunities, you're not going to be able to make the most of them. Again, these are things that came from young people. And the African Union said, okay, we're going to help you set up the strategic frameworks to do this. So what we want to see happen is governments now contextualize this, because I think that's what Marcy was saying as well. It doesn't matter, we have to be considerate about how we engage with our informal sector, because it's a reality for Africa. We can't just say, with the swish of a wand, we're going to formalize our whole informal. It's not going to happen. So we have to say, how do we incorporate it inside our existing African context? That's what we want governments to do. And to speak, our last policy, and then I'll hand back to you, that speaks again to responding to African women and youth and providing them with opportunities is the African Union Women and Youth Financial and Economic Inclusion Initiative, specifically looking at raising $100 billion to impact the lives of 10 million young women and entrepreneurs. So these are all some of the things, again, came from the people. And we're like, we need the young people then to go to their governments and say, we know what the African Union is doing. What are we doing about it in our country?
Right.
I come from the Kingdom of Eswatini. I'm going to advocate for it back home and say, how are we coming in and capitalizing off of the existing frameworks and strategies? And I think that's really sort of the consensus of the panel. We have to be informed, or young people have to be informed, and then advocate from the other side, and then inspire us to apply pressure. Pressure, pressure, pressure. That's really the name of the game, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I wanna start, and I wanna give you guys an opportunity as well. But does anyone have any ideas on, how to put government pressure on government to write the right kind of policy? There was a lady earlier from Kenya who was saying that Kenya has what they call a hustlers fund. Please, can we have microphones? There was a lady earlier who was talking about Kenya has a hustlers fund, and I thought to myself, there you go. There's a government that's already starting to say we're going to write it into the blueprint of our country that this is what we're going to do to create jobs. Any thoughts on how we start encouraging that pressure that we put on government where we're seeing it work? But also a few ideas that you think you want to see government writing into policy that should be shared not just with your own country, but with other countries on the continent. Please go ahead.
Merci. Bonsoir à tout le monde. Je reprends au nom de Florence Laure Fali. Je viens de la République centrafricaine. Je voulais féliciter d'abord les panélistes pour leur brillant exposé. C'est vrai que nous sommes en train de voir comment élaborer aussi les politiques en matière de jeunes. C'est vrai que les stratégies diffèrent, mais je vais donner l'exemple de la République centrafricaine. Nous savons que nous avons notre politique nationale de promotion de la jeunesse de deuxième génération. Et cette politique, nous l'avons élaborée en étroite collaboration avec les jeunes. Parce que nous avons lancé une analyse participative des besoins et aspirations des jeunes. Et c'est à travers le rapport de cette analyse participative des besoins et aspirations des jeunes, eux-mêmes, ils ont réalisé cette analyse. On est parti sur cette base pour élaborer le plan, la politique d'abord, avec 3 axes stratégiques que sont le premier axe stratégique parle de la consolidation de la paix, sécurité et cohésion sociale. Pourquoi? Parce que notre pays, vous-même vous le savez, est un pays à post-crise. Et cela fait que les jeunes ont demandé à ce qu'on prenne en compte un axe qui concerne la consolidation de la paix. Et le deuxième, c'est le renouvellement du contrat social entre l'État et les jeunes. Pour cet axe, nous avons 9 programmes. Ils ont parlé de leur santé, ils ont parlé de l'éducation, ils ont parlé de beaucoup de choses en ce qui concerne cet axe stratégique. Et maintenant, le troisième axe stratégique parle du relèvement du secteur productif par les jeunes, avec 3 programmes, à savoir l'entrepreneuriat des jeunes. Ça, c'est le premier programme du troisième axe stratégique. Nous avons aussi parlé de la nouvelle technologie d'information et de communication, parce que tout aujourd'hui se base sur la NTIC. Et le troisième programme de cet axe, c'est l'environnement. Depuis ce matin, on est en train de parler sur le changement climatique. Donc voilà ce que nous avons fait pour élaborer d'abord notre politique. Et comme nous avons notre politique, nous avons pensé maintenant au plan stratégique national de promotion de la jeunesse pour 4 ans. Donc, ce plan aussi, nous avons élaboré en étroite collaboration avec les jeunes et le Conseil national de la jeunesse centrafricaine, qui est une plateforme de la jeunesse dont nous avons travaillé avec les jeunes issus de cette plateforme. Et quand on est sorti de l'atelier, on a aussi élaboré notre plan opérationnel. Voilà les 3 outils stratégiques que nous utilisons aujourd'hui pour la jeunesse centrafricaine. Et tout cela, nous avons fait en étroite collaboration avec les jeunes. Je vous remercie.
So if in case you weren't able to hear all of that, if you are English speaking, just to give you a quick roundup, and I don't think I'll get to everything that Umama was able to say, but essentially what she did was she took us through a list of programs that the Central African Republic is running to synergize what young people need and what programs government provides. But there's a real relationship of listening to one another. Please bring the microphone to the 2 people at the front here. I think as we bring the microphone to them, Pauline, can I ask you to step in there? Because I love the example from the Central African Republic. I'm wondering, though, where the opportunities are for us to start learning from each other, right? Well, we take the ideas from the Central African Republic and we say, well, Zambia can use these, South Africa can use these, and whether or not we're getting anywhere in being able to synergize all of that.
Merci. Et je vais m'exprimer en français. Je suis très contente de voir qu'il y a des francophones dans la salle. Donc, je vais passer au français. Merci beaucoup, Madame, pour le partage d'expérience de la République centrafricaine, que je trouve très intéressant. Et effectivement, je pense que ça rejoint un petit peu le point que je mentionnais tout à l'heure, qu'il est important, pas seulement de consulter les jeunes, mais de les impliquer dans tous les processus d'écriture et de mise en œuvre des initiatives de développement et de consolidation de la paix. Et je pense que la RCA en est un très bon exemple. Et peut-être pour ajouter à votre point, Madame, au PNUD, donc c'est vraiment quelque chose qu'on soutient, mais au-delà des consultations, quelque chose qu'on encourage beaucoup, c'est la communication. On pense que la participation des jeunes, en fait, ne va pas sans la communication et le plaidoyer. De nos jours, on a la chance maintenant d'être dans l'ère digitale, comme on dit, d'avoir accès à un certain nombre d'outils innovants. Et on pense que c'est une opportunité pour les jeunes de participer autrement à la scène publique et au processus de prise de décision. Par exemple, on a accès maintenant aux médias sociaux, aux réseaux sociaux. Donc ça, c'est une opportunité pour les jeunes de s'impliquer, d'utiliser de façon positive les réseaux sociaux pour organiser des campagnes, etc. Je suis très contente aussi d'avoir la collègue de l'Union africaine ici dans le panel, parce qu'on a une initiative conjointe que le PNUD a mis en place depuis l'année dernière, qui consiste à diffuser des podcasts, des petits podcasts de 20 minutes, qui mettent en scène la voix de jeunes entrepreneurs de différents pays d'Afrique. Donc ça, pour nous, c'est aussi une façon innovante d'exprimer les besoins des jeunes, de laisser une plateforme, une place aux jeunes pour qu'ils puissent participer de façon meaningful. Donc l'idée, c'est vraiment de donner un espace aux jeunes pour leur permettre de pitcher, je ne sais pas comment traduire ça en français, de partager leurs histoires. Le business growth goes with communication, it goes with pitching, advocacy. Et une dernière chose, avant de vous rendre la parole, une chose aussi que le PNUD encourage de plus en plus, c'est l'utilisation d'autres plateformes d'engagement des jeunes, de mobilisation des jeunes. Je ne sais pas s'il y a des sportifs dans la salle, mais le sport est devenu un moyen de plus en plus utile et pratique pour engager les jeunes et organiser des campagnes de communication. Par exemple, on a un exemple assez récent au Mali l'année dernière, où il y a une campagne de communication qui a été faite en marge d'une course à pied qui a traversé tout le pays. Et donc ça a été un très bon moyen, non seulement de faire participer les jeunes d'une façon utile, mais aussi de construire, de promouvoir des valeurs de cohésion sociale, des valeurs de solidarité, de résilience, avec et pour les jeunes. Donc ça, c'est vraiment la vision du PNUD, c'est la co-création, c'est pas seulement de faire pour les jeunes, mais avec les jeunes.
Yeah. I'm not going to wrap up everything that was said with you because I know that a lot of us haven't gotten to get our headphones so that we're able to hear the translations. But briefly, Pauline really talking about how she agrees with Mama about the importance of creating those platforms for young people to share their ideas so that they're able to be listened to by a broader audience. Let's take a question from here at the front, please. There's the gentleman in the gray top. Yeah, okay, we'll start with you. Go ahead, sir. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I wanted to talk to the issue of the youths being misinformed that she was talking about, and why the youths are probably not coming to the table that is established. I think if we look across the African continent, one of the most basic truths that we should be able to agree is the rise of so many organizations that are started by young people, entrepreneurial organizations, advocacy organizations. They are starting to call themselves CEOs and all these. I'm sure maybe governments are waiting for young people to come to their table, but the young people of the African continent have created another table, and we are waiting for them to come, but they are not coming to that one because we cannot try. For example, just look at this YouthConnekt. It's only now at the end when we are beginning to have young people on the panel. The young people are seated in the benches. They are not talking. They are not saying anything. Why are we talking about an Africa outside and not the Africa that is inside the room? So that's number one. So young people themselves are losing confidence. They have created their own table. Number two, I'm sure you asked these young people that who has ever participated in a strike for jobs or oppression. We did. I wanted to respond to that as well. You see, young people are not participating in that because we are informed to the level of understanding that jobs are not created by strikes. Jobs are not created by pressure. For example, when you look at our curriculums at school, these are kind of curriculums that produce so many job seekers. I come from Zimbabwe, a country with so many educated people. Look at the level of unemployment in Zimbabwe, in such a country that has so many educated people. The point is we need to stop pressure of streets and demonstrations, songs that make no sense, and start the pressure of saying, maybe we need to reimagine our education from certificates to skill development, from job seeking to job creation. That kind of pressure is a pressure I'm looking for. And if we are ready for that pressure, the African Union, your aspiration number 6, talks about the people-centered development, and it talks about the participation of the youth and the participation of young women, and it talks about Vision 2063. What have you done as African Union to make sure that youths are prepared to do that? That's what I think this young generation needs to hear, and that's what I think we want. So give young people platforms, on platforms like this, the Youth Connect. Number 2, let's have a new kind of pressure. Let's not be like people of the past who have put a pressure that is not backed by logic or a methodology. Let's have a pressure that will lift this continent forward. Thank you very much.
All right, hello. I don't know how I can talk after this, intervention. Thank you, my brother, for talking for all of us here.
All right, guys. Thank you. Let's give the lady a chance.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you again for your intervention. That was like so much needed to hear. I just wanted to share about like a program because some of my sisters over here, we are 38. Just to answer one of your questions. So UNDP and AUC have come up with like a fellowship program, and we are 38 here represented, and we got access to that platform. So to all the young African ladies like over here who are, waiting for like such an opportunity, I advertise this African Young Women Leaders Fellowship Program. So that's one thing, that's one channel, and you can like look up on the African Union or UNDP Africa social media and everything. You will hear about it. And like, please stay in touch because the next cohort is coming soon. And we're here today, thanks to them. I'm personally based in the DRC, coming from Madagascar, in the government's pillar, and I'm working in projects to empower and like really make more young people participate in governance systems. So I'm really proud of that myself, and I'm like really sharing this information because without that, I wouldn't be here today. Also, within my work in the DRC, I'm very proud to say that we have a system called the Jeunes Rapporteurs des ODD, Jeunes Rapporteurs des Objectifs de Développement Durable, which have now thousands and thousands of people, young people from the DRC in different provinces, and they are working with the government to collect and analyze data for sustainable development. And so beyond, consultations and beyond dialogues, they're working with them so they both understand each other's challenges. And like they try to align, and really it's like, beyond words, it's like we're acting together. And that's like, I think, what should be more promoted within like every system. So thank you very much. And thank you again, brother.
Please give it to the gentleman behind you in the gray, the gentleman in the gray here in the front, please. I'll give it to you now, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Please, can we keep it brief, guys?
Sure, no problem. So what I want to say is, in terms of policy advocacy, what we also need to start thinking about is how we are reshaping it to actually lure the youth to actually see it as something that they can participate in. The traditional methods that we have been using in the past for lobbying and advocacy, that's in the past. Young people on social media, they're on all other media platforms. How are we using those platforms to understand the role they can play in shaping the policies that are there? And also shaping the narrative and the language that we have in terms of policy and social policy and all other forms of policy. The AU and UNDP and the all other UN agencies that are there. Young people are really eager to actually participate in that space, but it is a space they don't understand. We need to reshape it and then have the young people also understand it in a manner that they will understand it the best. And that way we'll have that synergy between policy and young people to see what they want to see.
I like that. I like that idea because, please give him a warm round of applause. The reason why I wanted to highlight that point is because, listen, I was asking earlier who's interacted in a protest for jobs, but I forgot that our protest is right here. And that's where we need to be listened to. I'm going to take those two young ladies in the middle who had their hands. Ladies, please keep it brief, okay?
Okay. Thank you so much. So my name is Musafiri Nikuze Divine, and I'm here with my colleague.
My name is Olive. our proposal was, we're from Excella School, so our proposal was, as much as we're thinking about the youth, how are we not thinking about the youth who live in the streets? How are we going to provide for them? Because each and every time we go home, there has to be a street kid waiting for you to provide food for them. So is it possible for them to talk to the government or to talk to other people, and they build schools and much more preferable homes for these street kids? And they have food and somewhere where they can learn. These business idea mean how hard. We were talking about it for a long time, and we thought it was a really good idea.
What's the point of being a leader if you don't put people's need in front of yours?
Yes.
So with this idea, we are helping young kids who don't have the opportunity to stand out from there. So we are coming on behalf of them so we can tell you guys about our project, about helping the homeless kids, kids who don't have family, to be in a school where they can feel loved and study at the same time.
I think as much as we want to provide for the young youth, we should also concentrate on the street kids. They're doing so much out here that is not for them, and at the end of the day, we end up judging them when we know we could have done something in the beginning.
Yeah. And I immediately think of the term "leave no one behind." Listen to everyone's voice. Osman, can I come to you for this one? We've heard the views of there was the gentleman from Zim earlier who was saying, well, we've created our own table. Right. And you keep asking us to come to the table, but we've gone and created our own table. Right. Is that the best way to go about it?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, my brother from Zimbabwe, for having outlined that. You see, we have to move from the theoretical discourse to the real structures and fundamental problems that is what youths all over from this room and beyond are actually going through. Let me take you back a bit. This country that we are, Rwanda, championed the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Yes.
It has been years of discuss in papers, in policies. It has been talked about. Until 2 weeks ago, I made a travel to another African country, and I was required to pay $100 for just 5 days. What Africa are we really talking about in the 21st century? Talking about integration, talking about globalizing and integrating young Africans beyond borders. What is the fate of a young entrepreneur who is born and raised in the Gambia, whose population is just 2 million? What market do they have to prosper if the borders are there? What structure has the African Union, down to our national governments, have adapted to give these young people space to strive, but made them, because a government creating jobs no longer work in the 21st century. All they can do is to be enablers. Governments don't create jobs. Entrepreneurs do. It is these youths who deserve that space. And not that they don't have the skills, not that they don't have the spirit, they do. They're passionate Africans. I can tell you this for free. I opted to come to this country and do a master's program in 2020 by rejecting all scholarships from the Western world. A story that is familiar to many. I was alone when I was coming. It has been hundreds more African students who have followed suit immediately after that. And that means they're looking inward. If the youths of Africa can trust each other from an online view and made that stand, made the move and come here and are acquiring their education, why is it difficult for African governments to trust each other by learning from within the continent? The rhetoric of believing that the African solutions can be an imported solution is what has been killing us. It has to emerge from within. And the young people has to be in the core of everything. I am into logistics. I do distributions. I can distribute containers across West Africa. If I have the structures built
For you to do that.
for me to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm limited to only Gambia, Senegal because of that problem. So these are problems that young entrepreneurs, young leaders here have borne in questions that they cannot even ask nowadays,
Yeah.
but have to take the lead themselves and create their own platform,
Yeah.
take the stance by their own.
I know that it's getting quite late. Please give him a warm round of applause. Would you allow me to put some pressure on the UNDP and the AU today? Would you allow me? All right, I'm going to do it. Pauline, I'm going to start with you. Sorry. Here it goes. We got up here to have a conversation about young people influencing policy. Young people say we've been trying to for so long. You guys aren't listening, so we're having our own conversation in another plenary room because nobody's listening to us. Well, that's governments anyway. So instead of me saying to them, well, let's sit together, I know, Mama, but instead of Mama, who was speaking earlier from Central African Republic, says, but I spoke out about our programs. But young people essentially are saying, we're having our own conversations in another room. Let me put pressure on you then to say, when we come back to YouthConnekt Africa Summit, how is it that you can commit to us that you would have done something to ensure that governments are listening and that there is synergy in policy that's written for young opportunities? It's a tough ask. Sorry.
Thank you. I'll try to respond to that. Well, very briefly, I think, first of all, this YouthConnekt platform is a wonderful opportunity to pitch your stories, share your stories, connect, engage with policymakers. They are indeed in another room right now, but please take this opportunity to meet with them, engage with them. You don't need to wait to sit at any table to share your stories and influence the policies. You have the opportunity right now. This is all about it. YouthConnekt is about it. And use the tools that you have. As you were saying, actually, you can use social media. Digital tools are here to be used in a positive manner. It's also a very powerful way to impact policies, to influence policy, influence your government, make your voice heard, and have a seat at the table.
Yeah. Assistant Tobago, from your side, I mean, the pressure that the AU is going to be putting, we're going to be putting pressure on the AU to put pressure on governments.
Absolutely. You're putting pressure on Cisnon Tobago to put pressure on the AU.
100%.
I think the lesson for me during this panel is listening, isn't it? I think it's about listening to young people. There's a lot of input that has come to say, we are having conversations, just not with you. We're having conversations, just not at the tables you're calling us to. And I think there's a call to action to us to seek out those tables, to seek out where young people are occupying these spaces. And I think my brother in the front was making a conversation about how we are reshaping policy within the platforms that young people are on. So go to the young people. And I think that would be a new approach that we have not done typically before. Because we're always saying, young people, come to us. You know where we are. This is where we're making the decisions. But perhaps next year, we're talking about how the African Union Commission has stepped into the realm of young people. Right. And we've listened to them and unleashed potential in some tangible ways, like my brother was saying over here.
Yeah. Mercy, I'm going to come to you, sis, just to close it up, because I think, you know, at the table here, you're the champion for real. I mean, everyone here doing incredible work without a doubt. But there's something to be said about what one campaign has been able to do in identifying young people that are activists involved in the political space, like you said you are, involved in business, but also entering those rooms with the AU, with the UN, with the EU, and saying, no, this is what we're demanding as young people, and really writing that wish list up, and taking it from what young people are saying. What is your call to action to all of us today? And I know that you have the jobs charter, so direct us to it so we can put some weight behind it. But I think just as we close off the conversation, you're the perfect person to round it up for us, right? The call to action, you've got young people here that are energetic. We're ready to to put up a good argument in a fight when it's time to? What's the call to action?
I think, first of all, when you talked that we have our own conversation in another plenary room, I think that other room for us as young people has been social media. And in my country, it has been powerful, but to some extent. You know, we've seen a person is appointed and people rallied against it, and that job offer was taken away. So there is power in social media, also in members of parliament understanding a certain issue is happening, and because of so much online protest, then a bill is drafted, or you get a comment or an executive order being shared. But I'll come back to what I mentioned. Do they even know the building they're supposed to be in? Do they even know the room? Are they invited to the room? Are they on the table? And the reason I say this is because all the youth here know the street. They know the street, but let's be honest. No executive order or no policy or law will be passed on the street or will be passed online. That's just a channel of communication. So the biggest question is, how are we going to have the voice of young people in the place that matters, in the place that has the magnificent impact? That's the biggest question to every leader that is here. How will you ensure that the youth that are always told are the majority, how are they really going to be included? And that comes back to the question of representation. And it's interesting that we are here in Kigali, and just within this city, we have the 145th session of the IPU. And under 30 years old parliamentarians, they are only around 2.6%. What can 2.6% move in a house that needs 50+1 vote, or that needs a third or 2/3 vote? That's how a gender bill in my country has failed 6 times, because women are not yet 30% of that parliament. So they can't do the 50+1 vote. It has failed 6 times. And I know the youth here know what they want. They have shared, they are probably the reason why they're in this auditorium. So my call to action is that we don't give up, that we continue to see the available channels. And most importantly, how do we unite as youth? Because there are those who are informed, there are those who are educated, but majority aren't at that space. So how are we going to rally together? How are we going to do community building? How are we going to do joint advocacy? How are we going to have dialogues within each other? And for those who have the position of youth advisor, because there's always a youth representative. I think many countries have a youth council or just some body that is supposed to represent the youth. What have those appointed youths done for their fellow youth? So those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. Who are these youth leaders calling themselves youth leaders if we are still at the same place we were 10 years ago? That's the first question. The second question, the leaders that you, the youth, go ahead and vote for, what have they done for you, and why do you give them the vote? Why do you not vote for yourselves? That's the unity I'm asking to us, the youth. Where is our unity? Because we have the numbers, isn't it? We have the numbers. So let's make use of our numbers in our vote, in our advocacy, in our presence in petitions, because for my country, at least our parliament will ask for memorandums to be given out. So do we bring our numbers and be able to bring out our voice? Are we able to bring petitions to the parliament? Because there's also the channel of private bills. So have we really exhausted all channels? Yeah. And most importantly, the leaders that call themselves youth leaders, what have they done for the youth?
Right.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to close the discussion. But I want to close it with my own call to action. Please get onto social media, follow One Campaign. Go ahead and please take a look at the People's Charter for Decent Jobs. It's a document that is asking for governments to agree to create not just jobs or menial jobs, but decent jobs so that we have careers, benefits, and we can plan our futures. Please give a warm round of applause to my guests, Mercy, Nontobego, Osman, and Pauline. You guys can leave the stage. And as we wrap up, please stand up and give yourselves a round of applause. You've done some great work today. Thank you so much.